Like most major American sports leagues, the NBA integrates new talent each year via a draft process. In the draft, the best young players from home and abroad become available for selection, with each team taking their turn to pick. Now, to ensure a level playing field, the lowest performing teams from the previous season get to pick first, thus in theory boosting their chances of future success by selecting the best available talent. But this can and does lead to tanking. Tanking is when a team deliberately weakens their chances of success through the season in order to assure a higher pick in the upcoming draft. Tanking is more common in the NBA than in some other sports that operate drafts. In the NFL, for example, squads can contain over 50 players, with 22 players needed to start on the offensive and defensive units, plus dedicated special team lineups for field goals, kickoffs, and punts. In basketball, rosters are typically made up of 15 players, with only 5 players on the court at a time. As such, a supremely talented individual can have a much greater impact on the team's prospects. So talent is paramount, and of course it comes at a premium. In the NBA, there are 3 main avenues to acquiring players and building a title-contending team. One is free agency. This is when a player's contract with another team expires and they are free to negotiate a new deal to play elsewhere. Another option is to make a trade. There is no transfer system in the NBA where players can be bought and sold. Instead, for an under-contract player to move teams, 2 clubs must agree to a trade. Any team hoping to convince another club to part with one of their stars will usually have to offer multiple players of their own, plus several of their designated picks in future drafts. And both trades and free agent deals can prove expensive. NBA teams are restricted by a salary cap, which means there's a limit on how much they can spend on total player salaries each season. The league's established stars tend to earn the most money and therefore take up large chunks of their club's salary spend. This, of course, leaves less room to fill out rosters with complementary players. So the most cost-effective method of team building then is through the draft. Rookies drafted into the league earn far less than established stars, and so take up less salary cap room. And a year or two of underperformance could lead to a team picking up a couple of future stars in the draft. One of the most infamous cases of tanking was when, beginning in the 2013-14 season, the Philadelphia 76ers deliberately weakened their squad to the extent that they were, at one stage, statistically the second worst team in NBA history. Within a few years, they'd accumulated multiple high draft picks, leading to the acquisition of future All-NBA stars Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons en route to becoming a perennial playoff contender. But how does a team tank? Well, a team intent on tanking might trade away their best players in exchange for future draft capital rather than for like talent. And throughout the season, they might rest their best remaining players for extended periods, creating a deliberate competitive disadvantage. The talent level within the NBA on the whole, coupled with the innate competitive nature of professional athletes, mean that the most talent-rich sides don't always win, but in theory, the teams employing tanking tactics will, over the course of an 82-game NBA season, sink towards the bottom of the standings. So when do teams tank? Well, there are several reasons why an NBA team might consider tanking for better draft positioning. From an underachieving franchise aiming to build for elusive success, to a big spending side looking to reduce their wage expenditure or deconstruct an aging lineup. Or perhaps if injury rules out a team's best player for a significant portion of the season, then they might decide to bottom out for the remainder of the campaign with a view to rebuilding once their top star returns. That was the case with the Portland Trail Blazers in 21-22. When an injury to all-star point guard Damian Lillard seriously hampered their chances of making the playoffs, they traded away their next best player, CJ McCollum. They ended the season with a 27-55 record and 7th pick in the draft, with which they selected promising teenager Shaedon Sharpe. And sometimes, as with the 2023 draft, in which 7'4" French teenager Victor Wembanyama will be the prized pick, the prospect of drafting a particularly prodigious player sparks a race to the bottom. So what has the NBA done to combat tanking? Well, it used to be the case that teams who'd finished the previous season with the worst record in each conference flipped a coin to decide who would get the number 1 draft pick. The remaining teams were awarded picks in reverse order of performance. The team with the 3rd worst on-court record got the 3rd pick, 4th got 4th, and so on. So in an effort to discourage teams from losing on purpose, the NBA introduced the draft lottery in 1985. In its first iteration, the draft lottery saw all teams who'd finished outside the previous season's playoffs entered into a random draw to determine the order of the first round of draft picks. The following year, this was amended so that just 3 of the lowest performing teams were entered into a lottery for the top pick. A weighted lottery system was adopted for the 1990 draft, with the worst teams given better odds of landing the top picks. And the most recent adjustment to the lottery procedure came into effect for the 2019 draft, and was introduced as a measure to further disincentivize tanking. Now, the 3 teams with the worst record from the previous regular season each have a 14% chance of landing the top pick. The odds for the remaining clubs gradually decrease in inverse order of their win rate. So tanking is not without risk. No fan enjoys watching their team lose, and it is possible to be one of the worst teams in the league and yet still miss out on the best talent in the draft. But sometimes the short-term pain of tanking does make sense. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. And if you do enjoy Tifo, you'll probably also like The Athletic. It has the best team of basketball writers in the world in a personalised experience connecting you with the teams that you care about the most, plus direct access to world-class journalists through live Q&As. And you can try it now for free for 30 days.